Now we start the very important panel discussion. We are actually late by about 5 minutes. I invite Dr. Kalika Bali to chair this very important session, and she will introduce the panelists. But Dr. Kalika Bali is a senior researcher at Microsoft Research India, and she has worked there for at least 10 years. And before that, she was in the HP labs working on speech technology, and she has diverse areas. And currently, she's focused on the code mixing on the social media. And I wanted to also share that she is an alumnus of JNU like me, and we have done courses together. Actually, we have taught courses in JNU together. So a great researcher, a great academician, and a great person to work with. So I invite Dr. Kalika Bali from Microsoft Research India to chair a very important panel discussion.
Hi, Girish. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm trying to get my, so is, is the video on now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome our panelists to this panel. We have a very eminent panel here, and I would like to welcome all of them and thank them for taking out the time to be here. I will introduce everyone as I invite them to say a few words about what do they think the state of language technology for Indian languages is going to be, what the future is, what the current status is, and where are we going now with Indian language technology. We don't have a lot of time, so there are 8 panelists and we have about 45 minutes, so that kind of is like about 5 minutes per panelist, including question and answer. So I would really request the panelists to be mindful of that. To start off, I would like to invite Patrick. Is he here?
Yes, he is here.
Yeah, hi Patrick. So I would like to invite Patrick. How do I pronounce your last name? Okay. He
Patrick
Patrick. Yeah, there you go.
So he is a researcher at the LIMSI Institute in CNRS in France, and he's been working on language information retrieval as well as human machine communication for a very long time, and he has his focus has been on NLP for a very long time. So I would invite him to talk a bit about where he thinks the language technology is going vis-a-vis Indian languages. Thank you, Patrick. Over to you.
Do you hear me?
Hello, Dr. Kalika. This is Dr. Shyam Agarwal.
Hello, do you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Patrick, can you speak? We can hear you. Patrick?
Hello, do you hear me now?
Yeah, Patrick, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So I will just share my screen and say a few words quickly. Okay. Okay. Share my screen. Get it. See my slide now. So the 2 questions I wanted to raise were the improvement brought by the natural language understanding capabilities with the recent advances we have seen in large-scale lexical embeddings, and also some of their limitations, and what would be their impact in the Indian context? Will it be as important as what happened in Europe, for instance, where since a few years, like since the arrival of the BERT language, we have seen BERT everywhere at every conferences? And the second question that this kind of new technology raises, or this rebirth of old technology, but on a much larger scale, as we have witnessed in the past, is what's the impact of using this type of approaches on the NLP technology deployment and the NLP evaluation in the Indian context? If we look at the BERT family, since 2018, in November, where the paper about BERT was pushed on the archive, and there were some issues of at the National Conference on Natural Language Processing. Then there's been a sort of revolution and conquest of the field by the BERT family. And the question which is raising in many of us is about how can you avoid to do BERT, and if we use BERT, what are the benefits? Is it really some new step in performance, or just a small delta in research? And the second point is that there are two series of questions. We have better semantics processing, almost at the level of a human performance as measured with the black box quantitative evaluations. We have multilinguality capability, which are really impressive, in particular with zero-shot approaches, where you just take BERT on language for which it wasn't trained, and then you have not terrific performance, but usable performance as a first step without any work of your part. And then the task independence that BERT has been applied to almost all the natural language understanding related tasks with good performance, reaching human performance almost on all of them. So it looks like it could be the solutions, but at the same time, it requires huge training data sets, which are not available to everybody. Using it requires a huge computing power. In graphical processes, you need TPU and supercomputers. And the result produced by the systems are not supported by symbolic models or understandable model, which produce, in fact, almost inexplicable results. You don't know why the system took that decisions. And the only way to reproduce it is to have the data and the computing power. So the question is raising about what will be the future in India, since India has some supercomputing power. I saw a recent post about India's education system acquiring huge computers, and India has a technology industry which is prominent in software. But what will be the impact on the natural language technology field? Here is the end of my presentation. I will let my colleagues ask their own questions. Thank you for your attention.
I am muted. Oh, now I'm unmuted. Yeah. Can people hear me? Because like sometimes it says the host has muted you and I can't speak. Can people hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Okay.
And what you raise is a very important point, and it's something that all of us who have been working in NLP for a long time are kind of thinking about all the time. I would now request Professor Pushpak Bhattacharya from IIT Patna and IIT Bombay. And, we all know Pushpak for a very long time, and he's been one of the leading researchers and scientists, not only in NLP, but also for AI in general, to talk about his views on where the future lies for Indian language technologies. Pushpak there?
Okay, yeah. Okay, am I audible, Kalika? Yeah.
Pushpak,
Okay.
just a second. Pushpak,
Yeah.
just a second. Nicoletta has joined, and I would like to welcome her to this
Okay.
conference. Nicoletta, good to see you after a long time. And she's the chair of the LREC, and thank you, LREC, for allowing our workshop #1 and also allowing us to happen online. Thank you so much, Nicoletta.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you for a while. Ciao.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Kalika, and thanks to Girish, thanks to everybody for giving me this chance to participate in the panel. It is very nice to see many old friends, Nicoletta, Professor Vetulani, Manojit, Kalika, Girish, everybody. Very nice to meet you. Okay, so coming to the panel topic, I have a very short presentation, and I'll share my screen. Is my screen visible? Kalika, is it visible? Yeah, I can see your head shaking. Yeah, so I know. Okay, so these are my thoughts with respect to the panel, and so first and foremost, a very quick observation that artificial intelligence is actually a celebration of natural intelligence. Every AI triumph throws up a bigger challenge and makes us bow to him who created our own intelligence. Just like every hillock scaled reveals a hill behind, and behind every hill is a mountain. Now, modern NLP is really language resource plus deep learning. And just a very quick perspective on machine learning, that it is a spectrum going from table lookup to rules to statistical machine learning to deep learning. And the power increases as we go to the right, explainability decreases from right to left. Now, India is really a haven for content, multimodal and variegated. There are these slightly old statistics on 8 January 2020. There were 665 million internet users, about 50% of the population. 625 million use internet from mobile, which is 79% of the total web traffic. Then still little older is from April 2018 statistics, 250 million social media users, 260 million WhatsApp users, 53 million Instagram users. So we can imagine the amount of content this kind of interaction on social media, internet generates. And a lot of them is in Indian language. Now, I would like to touch upon this point that we have all this content and we have to make them smart and rich. The beneficiary of this, for example, could be the education sector. Now we should adapt to users, for example, smart books, prepare lessons as per readers' need. We should pick and integrate cognitive signals. For example, the eye tracking data is the book and the material being understood by the student. Then we should accommodate multimodality, emotion, multilinguality. All these are very important dimensions to natural language processing. And Indian languages being a low resource scenario, multimodality is important. We have to capture those signals and capture also signals which could come from cognitive natural language processing, like eye tracking data. Now, the recommendations to whichever body is important for us is that we should replicate and continuously support efforts like ILCA corpora creation, which Professor Girish Nadja spearheaded. We should have national annotation policy. We should create huge amount of annotated data, for example, aligned speech corpora, eye-tracked reading data, multimodal, aligned video, audio, text data. This is in 3 modes, video, audio, and text, all 3 together. We should create platforms for data, tools, and resources. This is to organize the work of our community. For example, the initiative by NITI Aayog, CIL for language resources. We should also standardize the data creation. Again, efforts towards bringing method to this huge amount of energy and effort that we are doing. Then this data creation effort, there is already AI standardization initiative called under Bureau of Indian Standards called LITD 30, then IEEE SA NLP IC program. And we should introduce the topic of AI enablement in all curriculum. And we should not forget the revolutionizing effect of word embedding, which was mentioned in the previous presentation. We have to create rich embeddings for Indian languages. So if you look at the history, Word2Vec came in 2013, then Globe in 2014, Fast Text and Muse in 2018 from Facebook AI Research, then these days BART, Elmo, XLMR. So these embeddings have really revolutionized the field because they capture context and also additional richness stored in sentences, phrases, and so on. Now we have also contributed to this. One of our research work, which is in SLTO CCULR 2020, which is it's a joint workshop of spoken language technologies and under-resourced languages and collaboration on computing for under-resourced languages. This is part of LREC 2020. So we created 422 embedding models for 14 Indian languages, 4 varying dimensions for each of Globe, Skipgram, Sibo, and Fast Text, and 1 each for Elmo for every language, a single model for BART and XLM for all languages, and 182 cross-lingual word embeddings. So all these are large numbers, but they're not very difficult to create because we have very standard algorithms. Take the corpus, take big computing power, and you can create these embeddings. Now, Elmo perplexity scores carried out on many languages of India like Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Malayalam, etc., reveal some interesting things that perplexity lies between 100 to 1,000. But this Konkani perplexity being 15, about 155,000 is an outlier. We need to understand, why these numbers are coming. So this is only a glimpse of the kind of activities that is going on all over the world in a multilingual computing scenario. People are creating word embeddings and they are useful efforts. Finally, the new age AI/ML is really deep understanding, which is a combination of shallow understanding and big data. And understanding is in the domain of academia, data is in the domain of government, startups, and industries. So this is my main point in the presentation. Thank you. I will start sharing my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, so Atul has told me thanks Pushpak, thank you so much, that I am allowed to mute and unmute myself, but I'm not allowed to unmute myself. It says that the host has muted you and you cannot unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, I will keep in mind.
Yeah, so that's why all my signs and things are there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Pushpak. The next speaker is also an old friend, and we are always very happy to have him, talk to us and come to India when he can, which has been a very long time now. So I would now like to invite David Gibbon, who is a professor emeritus at University of Bielefeld, and we've all have had interactions with him and discussions with him on a lot of computational linguistic subjects for years and years. So, David, you're next.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, right. So yes, anyway, thank you very much indeed. It's great to be back in India again, even if only virtually. And that my topic this time is just a linguistic topic rather than a computational linguistic topic, but it's of course relevant. At least I hope it is. Many of the points I've been following the webinar, and many of the points I'm going to make have already been made several times, but I don't think I'll worry about that. Now, can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, right. So here we go. So I'd like to take a linguistic perspective, mainly on minority languages and translation, and the importance of translation, and the importance of, let's say, a kind of next generation translation, which will become clearer later on. And I have an apology to make right at the very beginning. I don't have any examples from Indian languages. I've been involved with China quite a lot recently, in recent years, and I have Chinese examples, so please bear with me on that. I think they're generalizable though. Okay, so my main theses are that as far as data are concerned, the usual mainstream consumer domains which have been talked about quite a lot in the webinar so far are not enough. We need more about minority languages, in particular with information about typology, translation, informal speech, and so on. We need more about education and applications of technology in education. We need more about applications of technology in speech diagnosis and therapy, also in minority languages. And the second thesis is that, and I'm sure this is going to be quite controversial, is that deep learning and so on is still basically pattern matching, okay? And that's not enough. So it's okay for various restricted and formal codes, but for example, even chat is too complex with ambiguities and error handling, natural language error handling, etc., being very complex. So we need information about structure and function, especially for translation, which requires a model of understanding, metalinguistic, structural, semiotic information, like kids also get in addition to data, language input from their carers and peers. So an observation, products are deficient in some ways, are excellent in other ways and deficient in some ways and need shared resources. So I suggest, competition, which is always there, and plus cooperation, plus communication, such as here at WILDRE and COSDA and so on, lead to transparency with shared resources. Now I'd like to do a quick comparison of translations to illustrate what I mean. The tools I'll use are the WeChat translator. I mentioned this as the examples of Chinese, which is actually Microsoft Translator, an older version of Microsoft Translator apparently, and Google Translate. And I do have German data, but I'll concentrate on English. And the goal of translation here is understanding, but in a different non-global cultural context every time, not just based on universal assumptions about understanding. So here we go. This is something I picked up just yesterday from WeChat. It's a message from a friend of mine about her sister's wedding. Okay, and of course I used a translator. This was a German translation, the application of the WeChat translator, Microsoft Translator for the German translation. And that's what the Chinese looks like. So I guess you understand Chinese. This means two, okay, right? So what does this mean? All right, yeah, I bet you got that. So anyway, these are the translations of this message. And I've annotated various problems in color: grammatical problems, lexical problems, idiom and metaphor problems, and icon problems. This is a chat. There are icons. How do you translate icons? And so here we get things like sister's wedding always feels long and short because good, tired. That's not English, really. Laugh should be smile. Here is a grammatical error. The verb is missing. The icon is completely ignored here and is simply translated by love at this point. Happy, this is incorrect. It should be happily. And this metaphor, just like above, is not translated, and it's incomprehensible basically to English speakers. Millennium second child is also incomprehensible. Love again. Okay, so I asked two friends of mine who are professional translators, and we have, very interestingly, two translators and two totally different strategies. The first translator decided to translate in an explanatory fashion, and this is something which is way beyond the reach, I think, of many systems these days, and the other in a literal fashion. So three golden flowers stays around. Millennium second daughter is nicely translated, but the element of single is missed out in the Chinese idiom, and the explanatory translation is much better here. Her two other daughters have been married already, and I'm the second and the only one left. You would not guess that from this particular formulation here. So there are various different strategies that need to be aimed at least. Socially useful domains like chat need to be looked at, especially for minority languages as well. They're used very often in all languages. State-of-the-art speech and language technologies, especially translation, make the need for a universal lingua franca less convincing. If we have, or national language for that matter, less convincing if we have good translation. But clearly an interdisciplinary basis for tools is needed: linguistics, psycholinguistics, sociolinguistics, and also domains such as teaching and medicine. And of course, we're very much aware of that these days with the restrictions which led to the online conference. And I'd just like to say it again: competition plus cooperation plus communication leads to the transparency that we need. And the important point here is that India does have the meta resources to create such infrastructures. This has come out in the talks so far. So I'll stop sharing the screen now, and thank you very much. Over to you, Kalika.
Yeah, thank you, David. Okay, yeah. Thank you. That is, that nothing less that we expect from someone who comes from a linguistic background. We always worry about what language really is. It's not just data, right? And so next we'll have a very different point of view, but one of the most important point of views from the government side. I would like to invite Mr. Vijay Kumar, who's the director of the Government of India's Technology Development for Indian Languages program. And again, with Vijay, we've been involved in a lot of committees and initiatives done by the Government of India on developing Indian language technologies for over a decade now. So Vijay is going to tell us how the Government of India views the future and the new directions of Indian language technology. Vijay, over to you.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. So thanks, Kalika, and hello, everyone. I would like to share with you that Technology Development for Indian Languages program of Government of India is implementing a project titled Natural Language Translation Mission. The development of SSMT platform will involve several academic and research institutions as center of excellence, along with startups. The goal of the project is to create speech and text translation technologies based on advanced AI techniques using parallel corpus of 1 million sentences for each language pair. Later, these technologies will be integrated to create speech-to-speech machine translation platform named as Bahubhashak. Bahubhashak is a Hindi term meaning one who can speak multiple languages. The other major objectives of the project are to set up state language missions for capacity building, deployment of localized solutions, increasing the Indian language content, discovery of data sets already available in the state governments, and to establish startup ecosystem and building leadership board of technologies available worldwide for Indian languages. Now, coming back to data sets, our experience has shown us that building data sets is a very costly affair, especially when we have 22 recognized languages and thousands of dialects. Therefore, new ways of building data sets are required, like using crowdsourcing methods by involving retired people, housewives, teachers, professors, and PG students. Sourcing data from state departments, involving startups in government-funded projects, and taking suitable policy measures like mandating all websites to be available in at least 2 languages. We have also announced a pricing policy for available datasets, whereby datasets for Indian startups and Indian academia is free. These can be had by Indian MSME and international academic researchers at 10% of the cost. The big companies, MNCs, and foreign entities can have these at 50% of the cost. These can be downloaded from nplt.in/demo. And this is the thing which I want to say about. So data set, having access to the data set, creating data sets is a major challenge that we recognize and hear from the researchers. And that's why we are trying to mitigate this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vijay. Yes, that is something that we all are like very deeply aware of, that data sets in all possible task domains from all possible Indian languages, at least the, the 22 official ones. That'll go a long way in helping us take Indian language technologies forward. Now I would like to invite Professor um, S.S. Agarwal to talk about what his views on Indian language technology and the new directions. And Professor Agarwal has been involved with speech technology for Indian languages for many years, and he has been also helping us organize this particular workshop. So Professor Agarwal, over to you. Thank you.
Am I audible, Dr. Kalika? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kalika. Thank you, Professor Girish, and very distinguished panelists. It's a pleasure for me to talk to you. As you have already told, I had been interested mostly in speech technology, and from that point of view, some of the points that I have in mind, I would like to mention is that now it is not only the monolingual speech recognition systems that we are trying to focus, but the emphasis is shifting to multilingual and cross-lingual ASR technology. Since India has got large number of languages, and in one group there are many similarities also in the languages, and particularly for the languages where the database is scarce and limited, this similarity of languages, and when we do cross-linguistic recognition, that will help a lot in developing technology for less resources languages. And we should not forget the importance of less resources languages or under-resourced languages, which are very large number in India. So one of the thing is that for this technology, we are developing mostly the multilingual and cross-lingual acoustic models and also the linguistic models based on the databases that we create for different languages. So this is one shifting trend that I would like to mention. And we have done this work for a few Indian languages where the resources were developed by us only. And that is Punjabi, Hindi, Nepali, Indian English, Urdu, Bengali, and Assamese. And we are very happy to share. I don't have the slides to show the results just now because in the corona, this time, most of my data is in office also. So, I have to speak like that without having substantiated by a good database. But let me tell you that our experience has been very good with this multilingual and cross-lingual technology recognition approach. And I would recommend, and I think the trend is that we go for multilingual and cross-lingual approach these days. The other point is, when we talk about a particular language, there are a lot of dialectal variations in a particular language. I'm talking mostly from the speech point of view, because I had been working mostly on processing the spoken speech signals and finding out what are the important features and then how we can recognize and what are the changes that are happening. So for example, if you take Hindi, now we say that Hindi is one of the largest spoken language in India. But the system which is developed, let us say, for Khadi Boli in Hindi in Delhi, when you use it for Bihari, when you use it for Bhojpuri, or when you use it for Rajasthani, or even Haryani, which is nearby Delhi, the same algorithm doesn't work. So one of the emphasis that we are now having is to find out the ways how these dialectal variations can be integrated with the language models and with the acoustic models also. So this is one important trend that we should look forward, and this is very important. You know, the grammar may be same when you are writing, and when you do translation, the problems may be different. But when you are doing speech-to-speech translation, or let us say, when you are doing an ASR system, which is spoken by a Khadi Boli person or a Haryanvi person, the things are different. So these variations are another thing that we are looking into. The other thing that I would like to mention is that the resource development technology is also changing slowly, particularly for speech database and things like that. Large resources are required, but for many languages, large resources of speech database are not available. So from the studio recording, I mean, those days are gone now. We have come to the kind of open source kind of systems where one can do large database collection and also in a proper manner. And the nickname is crowdsourcing methods for data collection and things like that. And we have personally, you know, when I was mentioning about these languages for recognition in multilingual mode, the databases have been created using the crowdsourcing methods, where there is a server and there is a cell phone in your hand. And on the cell phone, the message will appear to the speaker. The speaker will read that sentence, utter that sentence, and it will be online recorded on the cell phone itself as well as on the server through the network. So all these techniques are now possible. And the other change that we have done is in the annotation technology. The annotation, which has to be done manually, takes lots and lots of time. So the trend now coming up is go to ASR technology, do it by ASR, annotate it, and then curate it. So this technology will reduce a lot of time, but this manual curation is required to do a correct annotation and things like that. So reading the text matter, tap the resources, and then create huge databases which are required for developing the technology for that particular language. So these are a few things in which we have been involved for quite some time, along with some other institute, and particularly myself has been associated mostly with CTEC. So we have done this work in collaboration, and thanks to TDIL who had been supporting us on some of the projects. And of course, we are in touch with most of you stalwarts who are all present here. And with Dr. Girish, you know, we very frequently interact in Delhi because in Delhi. And I think I am very fortunate to have personal relationship and know most of the panelists who are here. And particularly, you know, it is a surprise for me to see Nicolata here. And I was not expecting that she will join from Italy. And very nice because we have been associated with ELRA in a big way. So thank you very much, Kalika, for giving me this opportunity, and Dr. Girish, and these are some of my views. And then if there are certain questions, I would be very happy to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Agarwal. I would now like to invite Professor Zygmunt Vetelani, who is a professor of language engineering and artificial intelligence at Adam Mickiewicz University, and in Poznan. And we know him for the conference that he organizes almost every year on language technology. And in the past as well, and even now, we will probably learn from him, from his experience with having to deal with some of the languages in Europe where the situation is very similar to India, and what we can learn in our context from their context. So over to you, Zygmunt.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you, Kalika. Thank you, Girish, to invite me to this panel. I'm very happy to be in India instead of, well, I like very much France, but at least the possibility to an ad hoc visit to India, because we are living in the Indian time here. Okay, so I will not share my screen. Instead of, I will try to share some of my ideas, if you don't mind. So India, or rather the Indian subcontinent, has a special position with respect to all other countries. This special position is due to the variety of official languages. 22 is more or less the number of official languages we have in Europe, accepted that Europe is much less populated than in India. What that means that the development of language technologies is very important. That I think I have this feeling that it is even more important for India than for many other countries. And there are several reasons for that. One, and maybe major, is to avoid development of different speed on both industrial and socio-cultural level. But what I think is particularly good in your case is the understanding of the problem on the part of central government. And this is something that we would be happy to have in Europe. This is at least my feeling and the result of my observations. We hosted in Poznan several times at the conference. You have mentioned colleagues from India. So let me once again re-invite you to come to Poznan for the next conference that was scheduled for the next year, but maybe it will be postponed. We shall see. In any case, you are welcome. Also, we'll continue this track of less, I would say, less and middle resourced languages that was initiated in 2009 already. In my very brief slot, I would like to focus on necessity to fill gaps persisting for many languages, not only Indian languages or most of languages. To that number, I would include also the leader, English, which is English. But in many cases, the gaps we observe are crucial. We should take as motto that what I already said at my presentation, the adaptation of the reply, famous reply from Euclid to the King Ptolemy I, that there's no royal road to the language technologies. There's no royal road. There's no way to bypassing problems, to go to practice shortages of any kind. What is a precondition to be successful with high technology are the very solid foundations. So we did a part of this road with our teams starting in 30 years, 40 years ago. At this time, our case, the Polish language was clearly under-resourced, but with very solid theoretical linguistic background. And this was our strength. Unfortunately, this is not the case for all. But what was missing was just the real size resources, digitalized corpora, and so on. There was nothing like that. A good example, for example, of this situation we had to face when we started really to go to the real size applications was connected with formal description of language. We already in 70s, if I published, we did have a very good description of the Polish verbal grammar. But the format was, well, but this was the typical case of very solid work directly addressed to humans. I have in mind the very important dictionary of Polish verb, absolutely unreadable, machine unreadable. It would be a problem to digitalize it also with our very advanced techniques. Maybe not, well, now, not anymore now, but this was the case 30 years ago. And so it was among the first, but finally, this solid work of traditional linguists was not translated into the technological success. So, from that point of view, I do not know the situation in India, but I may suppose there may be some problems in some places with problem with communication between computer scientists on one hand and theoretical or old age experts with very deep knowledge of languages, but not necessarily able to translate this knowledge into what the technology is looking for. So just to finish, one more word about the way that we did have to do, and this which is also the case of many around the world, and this is the way that I would be happy to be able to support and to help. So at the beginning, we realized the needs only when starting to attack very practical problems. This was around something like 15 years ago. So we had to do a lot of works, basic fundamental works by ourselves and from scratch. We had to develop morphological dictionaries and tools, grammars, parsers for Polish. Then we had to produce ourselves application-oriented corpora and related tools. And finally, one of the important projects was the WordNet. And this was one of the Polish WordNets. And this was a very important experience for us. But at this occasion, we realized that there are a lot of things concerning especially basic applied research that we in each country are must do by yourself.
Thank you, Zygmunt. I'm sorry to cut you short here, but we're running out of time. Thank you so much.
To finish the senses. Why? Because every language has its cultural bias. So copying all solutions from, let's say, English, it's not the way to do. So we have to do a lot of work by ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite Monojit Chaudhary, who is my colleague and a long-time collaborator on a lot of projects. He's the principal researcher at Microsoft Research Labs India. So now, Monojit, over to you.
Thank you, Kalika.
You're still there. I couldn't see you.
Yeah. And thanks to the organizers for inviting me for this panel discussion, and I have been enjoying this workshop a lot. Can you see my screen? This slide?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So actually we are at a very interesting juncture in NLP, because things which we can do now today, like multilingual zero-shot learning, has completely redefined the landscape and the kind of resources that we would typically need or think that we will need to enable a language. And we have been hearing talks like starting from Anoop's talk today, and Patrick talked about it. So Pushpak talked about it. So have we just solved NLP completely? And then where is the need for resources here? So I was thinking about it, and then I thought, okay, instead of giving any answers, and in this panel, everybody has been pretty positive, except for David, who has raised some interesting questions. So I'm going to be more like David and be a little more controversial. So let me ask 3 questions. For the third question, I will give an answer. The other 2, I don't have an answer. So the first question is, when we talk of Indian languages, which languages are we talking about, right? And we did a study which is now accepted in ACL 2020. It's called The State and Fate of Linguistic Diversity in the NLP World. So the graph, I'm not getting into the study, but I'm just drawing onto one particular result of that study, where we basically calculated the amount of resources available, both unlabeled as well as labeled, through LDC as well as the LRA map, which was very helpful in computing. At one place, you get all the list of resources right across languages. And for labeled data, unlabeled data, we looked at Wikipedia. And if we plot them, and this is like a logarithmic scale on both axes, so it's like orders of magnitude higher, and that dot at the top right corner is no prize for guessing, it's English. But then you see there are clusters of languages, and we have come up with a taxonomy. So these are all interns' works, so not blame us for the names. So of course there's this class 5, which is the winners, which are languages like English and French, but all the way down to you have the left behinds, which are languages like Gondi and Mundari, to take Indian language examples. But also 88% of world's languages fall in class 0. Essentially, they have no resources, neither labeled nor unlabeled data. And then we have this interesting category, class 3, which I call the rising stars. And this includes Tamil and Marathi kind of languages in the context of India, where we do have resources, some labeled resources, but a lot of unlabeled data. So these are certainly going to benefit from this zero-shot learning a lot. And we already saw in Anoop's talk. Now in Microsoft, we have Tamil and Marathi translators, which would have been extremely hard even 3 years ago to do. before BERT and its version within Microsoft, which we call Turing, before those things came about. But then what about Gondi, Mundari, or even like scraping bys like Bhojpuri and Assamese, where even the unlabeled data is not enough, not at all, close to what we would need to learn large-scale systems and do zero-shot transfer. So, so how do you tackle this entire spectrum? So that would be one question I will leave you with. The next question I'm asking is, what has been the trend so far, especially in the context and in contrast to the speech and language technology landscape for English? English being the global leader, which kind of we all agree. Chinese come very close though. So what I would say is it has pretty much been a chasing game, right? We have been chasing whatever have been done for English, we have to do it for our language. But in the process, we forget that English did it 20 years ago, and a lot of these things may not be relevant today. So for instance, if I start to work in a language like Gondi, for which nothing is available, do I start from morphological analysis, part of speech tagger and all these things, or should I just start with unlabeled data, collecting unlabeled data, do zero shot and directly do a translator? So these are interesting questions. And I think the problem with the chasing game is we will be always behind, and behind by several years, sometimes even decades. And probably we want to rethink, is this the right way to do? Of course, let me clarify. I'm not saying that there has been no innovations from India or on the Indian language context. There has been a lot of work, and this workshop itself, your papers itself, is testimonial to that. And we have a long history. But the question is, who defines the task? Who told us that pause tagging is important? That's because in English people did pause tagging. And today English, they are talking about natural language inferencing and pragmatics. And I'm sure after a few years, those will become the hot topics in Indian languages. So that's what I mean by the chasing game. Who is defining the problems and the metrics? So then I come to the last point, which is talking about metric. What should be the goal of language technology and resources? How should we define what is the ideal metric? And if you think of it, NLP is pretty much like this. Define a task. It can be pause tagging, it can be machine translation, or it can be natural language inferencing. You choose. Then develop evaluation and training set for it. And then there is a race for, SOTA, state-of-the-art performance on that evaluation set. Somebody gets 95, somebody gets 95.6. Yeah, I have a paper on that. And the problem there is, often later people show that these are just like, again, going back to David, at the end, neural nets are pattern recognition algorithms, and it's extremely easy to break them. He showed a great example of how to break them, even for very resource-rich languages like English and Chinese, right? So we are typically trying to overfit to data sets, and we define those tasks and we just run after those tasks. So here I have a proposal. The proposal is, what if instead of thinking about any of these like tasks and accuracies and all, the only metric we cared about is how many native speakers of those language, of the particular language, did get a positive impact because of the technology. And that is my only metric I care about. Now, of course, there is a lot of problems there. I mean, it's an idealistic metric because how do you measure the impact in a more objective term? The socioeconomic impact is much harder to measure. You have to go all the way to deployment, see whether it's benefiting people. But what's interesting is we did try to do that with two language communities, Gondi and Mundari. And we had very interesting finding that the needs of these linguistic communities were extremely different. So very quickly in Mundari community, we saw that people really want their language to survive. So they really wanted education apps in their language. They wanted, documentation apps for their language, heritage preservation apps, and those kind of things. Whereas in Gondi, the problem was they really did not have information access in their language. Mundaris all are fluent speakers of Oriya or Bengali, depending on which side of the border they are. But that wasn't true for Gondi speakers. And for Gondi, they really wanted information access. So it was text-to-speech systems, speech recognition engines, and translation engines, or even search systems, which became more important. So I would end with this, that deep learning is not the solution to all problems, and it's neither a problem for other solutions, right? We need everything, and we have to rethink where we need to apply what. Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you. Yeah, it says you're, now I'm unmuted by host. Right. So do we have any time at all for questions, or because I know that we are like very late?
Yes. Okay, we can take one, two questions maybe.
I think you know what Monojit and say David kind of put forth are kind of interesting aspects. Like, are we really just running after SOTAs and you know accuracies and numbers and what is required to break the next SOTA requirements, or are we really looking at people who will use these technologies? And I would like some of the other panelists to respond to that. So if anyone is willing to respond to what Monojit just said, um, you'll have to raise your hand and wave, I think. Okay,
Could you
no one.
unmute all the panelists, please?
Sir, मैंने सभी को कर रखा है.
So I don't know,
unmute.
maybe like, I don't know. Pushpak, do you want to respond to
Yeah.
what Monojit said? Yeah.
So, Manojit, David, both are very, very right. We have also felt always through our work that we are dealing with a big pattern matcher. It memorizes patterns, okay, and then there's a kind of table lookup where if you have multiple lookups successful, then they are given a score which is based on probability, and that probabilistic score is also based on a well-known fundamental principle, which is maximum likelihood estimate. So since it is maximum likelihood estimate, therefore the corner cases will really fall through the hole. Okay, we will not be able to deal with it. So these are really important insights, and we understand that. But I wrote an equation. Modern NLP is language resource plus deep learning. Deep learning has made it possible not to be bothered about a lot of nitty-gritties. Many language phenomena are extremely interesting, but if you want to build a practical system quickly, then pattern matching is a good way to go with probabilistic score. And we also have started some work on retrofitting word embeddings to language resources. For example, we created the Indo-WordNet, and we are taking those Indo-WordNet constraints and path lengths, etc., to retrofit the word embeddings. So pattern matcher, yes. But pattern matcher, if it is augmented by language resources, can be an effective machinery. It is an optimistic stand, but I think it's good to go with some optimism. Then you get energy. Girish first.
Right. Can I, Kalika, just take 1 minute?
Yeah,
Okay,
every time somebody speaks, I get unmuted completely. So I can just like, yes, Girish, please go on.
Well, there is two sides, you know, the optimism and there's a pessimism also. That's why particularly I would say Monojit and David. But I think the silver line is that there is a lot of population actually now connecting with technology through mobile phones. And out of every 10 new people connected to internet, 9 are actually using Indian languages. So the technology has made an impact even to the last man in the remotest corner. They have mobile phone. They want to connect. The question is whether we have speech technology for them in their language. So if we talk about language technology and we can make small apps for all these languages, you know, and say target Gundi and collect enough speech data so that we can have an ASR for them, so that they can connect. So we need to focus on those small technologies which can connect the last man, the remotest corner of India, and get benefits of the government apps and services and other education. For example, right now we are having the MOOC education by government and also the Zoom web conferences, etc., etc. So let everybody connect, and if they can connect through mobile phones. We should focus on those niche technologies which helps our people in our country.
Yeah, so just to be, fair to both David and Monojit, I don't think they were being pessimistic. I think they were pointing out to the fact that, perhaps we get so caught up in, building accurate technologies that we don't really think about in what context they're used and who is using them, what is the need of that language community which is using that technology. That's how I understood it. David, do you want to respond to what they've been saying?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's obviously true that what Pushpak was saying, that it's all about resources and big data, let's say, or neural nets or some powerful means of learning. The question still remains, though, what kind of resources? And is there such a thing which goes beyond pattern matching? Is there such a thing as a model of a culture which will enable us to distinguish between literal semantics and idioms or metaphors? Is that something which is, of course, this gets into regions of extreme complexity, but still, I think the study of idioms, the study of metaphors, and so on the side of semantics and pragmatics, is very important, and I really like to see in the next, let's say, couple of decades, at least I assume I still have a couple of decades to go, some kind of answers to this sort of problem, right? Over to you.
Yeah, and I just will quickly qualify one thing, I mean, with respect to Girish's point. So absolutely, Girish. So let's say we want to build this ASR for these Gondi speakers. But what is also interesting, and I think not much research has been done in that direction. I don't know about speech, but in NLP, I haven't seen much, which is, let's say I have a speech recognizer that works at 80% accuracy. So 20% word error rate versus another, which is 15% word error rate. Which one, I mean, of course the latter is better, but if I have to invest the amount of money and resources to go to that 5%, is that worth, for the community? Can they, is 80% just good enough for them? So this is something I haven't seen much research into, and probably is an interesting area to study. Kalika, you shouldn't unmute your mic. That's the trick. Once you, shouldn't mute. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing is that if I don't mute, like I'm in a noisy environment, then everybody gets to hear all the noise. Right. Thank you. I think this is a very interesting discussion, and I'd hate to close it now, but we are like really late. We are almost half an hour over time. I would suggest that we should have a half a day discussion just on this, because there are really important points of view and suggestions and directions to follow from such discussions. So that's my suggestion overall, that we probably need a longer, deeper engagement with such questions, because it is really going to affect how and what and where the impact of Indian language technology is going to be. With that, I would like to thank all the panelists for taking the time and being here and sharing with us their work, as well as their thoughts about where we are headed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kalika, for a wonderful panel discussion, and a lot of new ideas came through, and I'm sure we'll be will be working on those lines and at least thinking that, what could be best for our country, our languages, and our people. And Kalika has been with WILDRE right from its inception. She, with Kumar and I remember, was instrumental actually in coining this term WILDRE, from World English, right? So thank you, Kalika, once again. And regarding having a deeper engagement, I think, Nicoletta, perhaps you're meeting in France next year for a get together, right? Okay, hopefully. So if we do meet next year, let me unmute Nicoletta.
Either next year or in 2 years. We have to see how it evolves. Okay.
Right. So whenever we meet next time, on a platform, we have a longer panel discussion on focusing on India. India is certainly very, very important from many perspectives now. So we'll certainly do that.